Hi, I'm Pete Leiden. I'm here in Cambridge, England at the University of Cambridge, King's College. We're here for the start of a new conference by a new institute called the Institute of New Economic Thinking. This is a new institute that's been launched by George Soros with a $50 million investment.
This is the first conference ever to bring together the leading lights from the economics profession with policymakers and with historians of economic thought.
In the aftermath of the most recent financial crisis, people have no faith in unfettered free markets. After watching the bailouts, they have no faith in government, and they probably lack a good deal of faith in experts. We're here to join together to try to rebuild some of that trust and dig our way out of these problems.
A lot of what's going on at the Institute for New Economic Thinking's inaugural conference is to think, how do we really fundamentally rethink economic theory for the 21st century?
A new economic thinking is needed to ensure that in our response to the financial crisis, we are adequately radical, addressing the fundamental drivers of instability, not just the symptoms.
We should be having a dialogue, for example, with those who viewed the financial crisis fundamentally as a breakdown in the rule of law, particularly in the United States, to discuss the aspects and the evidence for fraud and corruption.
What INET offers of trying to prick the conservativeness of mainstream economics is something that's very valuable.
If you decompose global inequality, most of it, actually 80% or more, is due to your location, which means your citizenship basically in a world with not much mobility of labor and citizens.
More unequal societies create greater status hierarchies and therefore more status competition, and therefore more consumerism. People work longer hours, they get into debt more because they need to purchase things because status matters more. If we want sustainable economies and to rein in carbon emissions, we have to rein in consumerism, and greater equality may be leverage for achieving that.
The global crash of the last couple of years has caused a lot of trauma, and there are a lot of feelings out there about what do we do next. We saw a little bit about that actually today, where we had a group of Cambridge University students who broke into the balcony over here and actually protested the IMF speaker who was doing the keynote over lunch. Now, one of the nice things about what INET is doing is we are opening up what previously were closed meetings.
That's an unconditional.
Now, we do this in a special way, too. We do this with a 3-camera shoot. It's not just a one camera in the back that kind of covers it like C-SPAN. This is actually covering it very much live in that you've got different angles of the crowd, different angles of the stage there, and it's actually live switched by a director.
So why, we might ask, do we need new economic thinking? And why, somewhat paradoxically, did we start on the opening dinner of the Institute of New Economic Thinking with a session entirely devoted to two economic thinkers who produced their work 70 or 80 years ago, Keynes and Hayek?
Because I think one thing the crisis has taught us is that 70 years later, Keynes and Hayek still represent the nether poles of theoretical debate in our profession. And moreover, it wants to construct the relationship between the two of them as an argument about government, when in fact, if you read them, they are also very, very concerned about the inherent instability of capitalism.
Because it was Keynes' belief that economic policy can improve people's life, let us draw inspiration from this belief and work together.
Hayek's takeaway message is that the economy is a complex adaptive system, and that when we confront such a phenomenon, our ability to control it is severely limited.
Today's new twist on that old story is the suggestion that central banks have become part of the problem. The problem, I suggest, is that central bankers have been listening too much to the academics.
Once you start talking about the influence of ideas, one has to say among those that have to take blame for the crisis is the economics profession. Not those here, but other economists who are not here. There are several aspects of the behavior of the economy that seem so patently inconsistent with any model of rationality, at least any systemic rationality, that attempting to construct a model predicated on rationality that explains such behavior is, I think, almost doomed.
A lot of discussion in the press that what we really need to do is deal with more realistic behavioral assumptions. I'm in full agreement with that. But I think that's just part of the problem. I think the other big part of the problem is that we need to really treat the economy as a complex system. If you benchmark climate models against the economic models of climate change, there's no question about which is better.
We do these side interviews behind the scenes. We also do it on the floor. But what we're going to do now is we're going to pop in on interview in progress in the room here. Give you a little sense of what we do.
This is a time of real soul searching.
This new generation that's growing up, with the crisis as their intellectual backdrop, will potentially change the economics that's in the textbooks, a decade or two from now.
We need good public policy formation in the United States and the United Kingdom and in China, all the countries. We need to have a better standard of public policy formation, and some aspect of that involves international cooperation.
The prevailing trend in the super bubble was also the ever-increasing use of credit and leverage. But the misconception was the belief that markets correct their own excesses. Reagan called it the magic of the marketplace. I call it market fundamentalism.
Actually, Joe Stiglitz has a great line. He said if this crisis hadn't occurred, Joe would have seen that as a failure of economics, because the incentive problems are so bad that they should lead to moral hazard, excessive risk-taking, capture of regulators, and then repeated cycles of bailout. I think that's exactly right. Deregulation applied to finance allowed people in the financial sector to make much more money and allowed them to plow that money back into further deregulation.
Within limits, properly regulated markets are far superior than the state in allocating capital. However, active but gradual state intervention is necessary to guard against the social and economic costs of occasionally excessive swings.
Any government spending would be better than no government spending, because if you do nothing about the situation, the economy will continue to contract. And so I think we all did the right thing last year, putting a fiscal stimulus. The challenge is to see whether we can maintain it until private sector balance sheets are repaired.
A lot of what's going on at this inaugural conference is what's taking not just on the official stage, but in fact in the conversations in the hall, the networking, the new relationships, the cross-disciplinary crossover. And that's what we're also trying to capture here.
Nothing's ever settled in economics. That's the great thing about it. Keynes, people are always coming in and say, Keynes got it wrong. Now people are coming in and saying the people who said Keynes got it wrong, the Lucasians in Chicago, Milton Friedman, now they got it wrong.
My own view is that it was the public sector that took enormous risks. If you set a 1% interest rate at a time when property prices are going up at more than 10% a year, and there's positive serial correlation in prices, you're asking for a problem.
The view that deregulation should go in only one direction fails to appreciate the soft snake oil underbelly of capitalism. It's true that capitalism does work, but unfortunately, capitalism sometimes works all too well, and then it also has to be curbed.
I would establish a West Point for top regulators and give them the kind of esprit de corps and toughness that is needed to face crisis pressures.
The next phase of what's going to happen here is we're going to put all this on the web, and then we're going to allow large numbers of people, particularly the next generation who's using these new media tools, to start building off of the video that we took here on the new collaborative platform, Google Wave. There, people are going to be able to discuss what happened here, evolve the ideas that were here. The conference doesn't have to end. It's just a beginning.
We do need new economic thinking. But even more importantly, I think we need to ensure that public policy debate is not constrained by acceptance of an oversimplified version of one strain in economic thinking, but open to the great variety of insights which good economics has always given us.
We really have to rethink our view of the financial markets quite profoundly, recognizing that instead of perfect knowledge and perfect information, our understanding is inherently imperfect, and that applies to market participants and regulators and social scientists alike.
The success of INET has now been assured. We've finished the conference, and now the meetings, the relationships, and the conversations continue online through the web.